Well, let's get started. Got a lot to talk about today on the well.
All right, welcome to the well. On this morning, we got Dana Dane, Brianna, Elder Charles, and Sister Tammy Black. Sister Tammy Black is a first-time guest on the well. Can you give us a little background on yourself?
Sure. I am a marriage and family therapist. I currently work with the population of substance use and co-occurring disorders such as depression and anxiety. I've been doing psychotherapy for about 8 years, and I'm currently matriculating my doctoral program to become a psychologist.
Wow, awesome.
Amazing.
On today, we want to talk about depression, suicide, and the Black community. Lately, there's been a lot of suicides on Facebook, people posting their suicides, a lot of people dealing with depression. And in the Black community, we don't like to deal with depression. We label it as certain things. Have you ever heard about that, Sister Tammy?
Yes. So the reflection of depression is often we identify it as stress rather than just depression. Depression is a stigma that we kind of push away from, a diagnosis, for instance. So how we deal with things, usually we hear stress, I'm stressed out, I'm overly stressed. And so it's categorized and it's kind of actually suppressed and downplayed in that aspect.
What are signs of depression?
Some signs of depression is lack of sleep or too much sleep, lack of appetite, kind of withdrawing from connections physically, emotionally. If you ever see someone that kind of withdraws from their regular activities such as church or school, there's probably a reason. We also see that depression actually manifests itself in different ways.
I have a slight question.
Yes.
How do we make people aware of the dangers of ignoring the signs of depression?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. So one of the ways is how we're doing it right now, basically the platform, and using education, right, talking about it. One of the things that we don't address in church is depression and anxiety. 1 out of every 5 persons in the church as a whole actually are on psychotropic medication for anti-anxiety, anti-depression. And it's shameful, it's guiltful, it's living in a shadowed life without reaching out because it's not acceptable per se. But just learning about it, talking about it, accepting that we are human beings, spiritual beings living a very human experience. It's not necessarily a mental health issue, it's a human condition.
Wow.
And
that's so interesting, that, there are certain things that are acceptable, like, that aren't acceptable, but it's not acceptable to allow people to be, human. And like I said, like depression, but why isn't it acceptable? Why can we do certain things on social media, but not allow people to cope with what they're dealing with? How do we address something like that? What do you think?
I think they had 2 very strong issues right here. I'm pretty sure that when soon-to-be Dr. Black was going down the list of the symptoms of depression, all of us were going, okay, wait a minute now. I didn't feel like eating lunch last week, or I didn't feel like being around a lot of people last week. It's and you said 1 out of 5 people are on psychotropic drugs, to help deal with the psychotropic medication, where Sister Brianna talked about us not necessarily wanting to talk about it. And that fits into us wanting to give off the impression that we are okay. There is nothing wrong with me. That is not true. Americans deal with higher levels of hypertension than any other group of people on the planet who are not in war. And we like to come to church and we like to walk around like everything is okay when we literally are depressed. When it comes down to that, and we're so plugged in about how it looks to everyone else that at least the church should be a place to where you can come and say, I need help.
I think that's so interesting because, I think too often, or focus on the things that are so human, the human aspects of people. In the church, I think we have to address the spiritual, yes, but we also have to address, that we are human. And one of the most human things in the world is to allow yourself to kind of feel depression. Not that, like you said, not to necessarily label it and go around dwelling in it, no, but to admit that, there are some things that are, that you're dealing with.
We keep hitting on the topic of the church, and I know from a point of view of growing up in the church, one thing you're kind of taught and beat up the head about it, if your depression is like the devil or the enemy, and you're taught that, hey, that's the devil bothering you, shake that off, move that off, shout that off, and it'll go away. But in truth, it's not. You have to deal with it.
I'm glad you said that, because as you were talking, I was thinking back. I remember at one point in my life, I felt different. I didn't really know it was depression. I'm still moving, same Dana, moving around, joking, laughing as normal. But on the inside of me, I still felt like it just didn't feel right. It was like lonely. It just stuff didn't make sense to me. And so it wasn't until it was getting really bad to the point I started having anxiety attacks, and I'm like, what's going on with me? And so, I went to the hospital, and they're like, oh, you just having anxiety. And I'm like, well, Jesus, I've been in church all my life. And it got to the point I'm like, well, I don't want to be medicated. So how can I, without, because I'm not going to talk to anybody about it. I'm trying to figure out, well, how do I, deal with this myself? And so it was to the point I couldn't take it. I'm not sleeping at night. I'm losing sleep. I'm not eating, and I like to eat.
You just said something that hit me right here. It's
What was that?
You shouldn't have to deal with it yourself.
Right, that's true. But
The
at
church
that point,
is supposed to be a place to where we can come together and lock arms, where you should be able to say, listen, y'all, I grew up around here. Y'all have known me since I was a baby. I hurt.
And that's exactly
and we
what
not run and talk about you, She said and everything else. What they doing? We should be able to come together. This is supposed to be a safe place for you to get love. Along with that, West Angeles has an excellent counseling department.
Really?
Oh my gosh, Dr. Paula Litt and the rest of the counselors down there, they're on
amazing.
it. But we have a stigma about being seen going
That's true.
into the
That's
counseling
true.
department.
That's true.
There is still a heavy, not from the ministry itself, but there's still a heavy level of judgment. And because if I see you ask for help, it highlights that I need help too, and that everything isn't perfect in my life, but I've been wearing this mask to make you all think that everything is perfect in my life when it isn't. I need to be safe enough to say, I'm hurting over here, y'all.
And on another note, I would like to add to that, because it's such a connotation and a heavy burden to actually appear some sort of way, especially if you hold certain positions. People have their different projections about how you are, who you are, and who you should be. So it's a humbling experience to have to come down and really ask for help, right? So you have to ask, at the end of the day, how do we actually identify areas of weakness in individuals? Because they do cry out, they do speak. So one thing that I recognize is in prayer requests. You see depression and anxiety in prayer requests. It's not just a meeting of that prayer, it's actually praying over the symptoms connected to the prayer request, because everybody's not going to be transparent, but that's a way of actually identifying one part that the person is actually suffering with.
So I'll ask you this question, Tammy. One thing I've learned from being in church, and you spoke on prayer requests, is when it becomes that time in the church, we're told, come to the altar, get on your knees, and repeat Jesus, 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 Jesus. But from your point of view, how do you think the church and your community could merge in a way to how to deal with it, kind of like in a psychological way, and the church way, to say, hey, to deal with these issues? Because I can say Jesus 20 times, but I still have to address the issue.
Right.
Okay. And that's where the importance of the one-on-one discipleship and mentorship comes in, because it's not enough. It's not enough. It's years, and it's deep hurt and pain and emotions, and everything is not going to get solved. He can perform miracles, right? And it's a lot of things that actually get resolved at the altar. However, that aftercare is very, very important, connecting, because once you release people have came to the altar and they feel okay physically, because your body releases different, endorphins. However, afterwards, they have to step back into that environment and it's, we don't know what they're stepping into at home or if they have a home. It's just basic resources and lining someone up at the altar and getting to know them and seeing exactly what do they need and connect and referring them to.
Who can I go to? The missionary that can pray heaven down sometimes isn't the missionary that can help you guide you through something you're dealing with. So how do you know who to go to, when to go to, and how they know how they can deal with your issue?
With this being a safe place, someone who has been helped and healed, enough of us who have been helped and healed need to be properly oriented and trained to be able to see that and be there for those who do come down to the altar. And then from there, they can quickly identify who might need to go see Sister Tammy or who might need to go see Sister Paula over in counseling. But they have to feel safe enough, and we have to be responsible enough as the body to be able to catch them and love them. Love. That's our business. And if we can start to do that and exemplify it, pull back up past all of the judgment, all of the assumptions that we make of people and the notions of being perfect, then we can start to do something good.
I think that's a wonderful solution to the problem.
Dr. Tammy, when you talked about the medication and that out there, I'd wondered, was it a thing to where there's the cultural paradigm we talked about? If me and Sister Brianna are great mechanics, we can go outside and take my car apart and lay all the pieces all over the parking lot. And because we're such great mechanics, we'll put the car back together again, turn the key in the car, start. Everything is okay. But if me and Dana are great surgeons, we go out there to the street, we find a dog. We cut the dog into little pieces. Since we're such great sermons, we can put the dog back together again. The dog still isn't going to bark at us. There's something significantly different between machine life and living created life as God created it, but we're treating each other like we are machines. Take this pill and that you're completely autonomous. That thing that gave the dog life is what is connecting us. And it comes back to us being able to be connected with each other, with us being able to cry out and do that. But with the medicine and with your field, how are you able to balance the spiritual and the academic and the intellectual learning that you're being able to combine there? How do we as the church be able to balance that out?
We're living in a society where you have to actually be careful of different assignments, right? When you actually are taking a medication, you're actually changing the physical structures of your brain. It's a lot of individuals that do not need to be on medication, but because agencies are short-staffed. Medicare is a huge issue with Medicare. Right now, the quickest thing is, I can't give you a quality therapist, but I can give you medication. And then the medication becomes an addiction, right?
Now, Sister I'm sorry to cut you. I'm so sorry to cut you off, but that is something that I would like to explore more, that there are individuals who are medicated that should not be medicated. Now, don't you guys think that that's something worth looking at? That people are taking drugs that they shouldn't have and don't need.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's all about bridging the gap. The greatest human need is a sense of belonging, right? And if we create an environment where people are accepted, right? It's when we get to a certain place, we don't look like what we've been through, right? But they do need to see that vulnerability, that human part of us, just as individuals, so they can see they can actually make it out. And this goes for adults as well as children.
So Sister Tammy, I know in your field, and one thing I want to do is end this on, is what are different ways or areas people can go for help in your field?
Okay, so there are several resources that I can actually provide you all for the individuals that you think may benefit from any type of therapy, individual counseling, counseling for children, etc. So the number one number that I'm going to give you is a 800 number for the Los Angeles Department of Mental Health. And this is going to give you a lot of access to many different agencies in the LA County. And the number is 800-854-7771. Also, I'll give you a number to the National Suicide Prevention Center. Depression is heavily connected with suicide. So the number is 800-273-TALK, TALK. And then one more, We have a counseling center at West Angeles. So the number for that is 323-737-7463.
Thank you for joining us on today, Sister Tammy. Hopefully we can have you back another time and finish the conversation and talk about other things. We'd love to have you back. Thank you for joining us on The Well today. Just catch us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and we'll see you next time. Looking for more West State TV original content? Like and subscribe to make sure you never miss a video.